there's a lot of different ways to grow sales, and the idea here is to be very smart about where you invest. We say if you don't measure it, it doesn't change.
Hi, I'm Bruno Aziza, and today I'm sitting down with Bethany Rodenhuis. She is the VP of Corporate Planning at Northwestern Mutual. So thank you very much for your time.
Happy to be here.
So now Northwestern Mutual is the #1 individual life insurer in the U.S. $167 billion in asset, $21 billion in revenues. It's a fairly large organization. You've got certainly lots of best practices you can share with us. First off, tell us a little bit about the relationship between the balanced scorecard and business analytics at your company.
Sure. We started out with the balanced scorecard many years ago, and as we've matured in that, we've essentially gotten deep into the metrics. We basically say if you don't measure it, it doesn't change. And so as we've studied the metrics, that's taken us layers into how do we drive change that really makes a difference in those metrics.
And so then you got a CEO that came in and started investigating the balanced scorecard, and I think you got into decomposing analytics. Can you tell us a little bit about what your thinking is there?
Sure. Our new CEO, John Schliffsky, asked my team a year or two ago to start looking at the strategy metrics and trying to take them apart. So what drives each of the metrics just from a very mathematical perspective, and then how sensitive are those metrics to change in any given driver. So my team for the last 2 years has really been taking all of our metrics apart, working with our business units to see what drives a metric and how sensitive it is to change.
So this is interesting, and it's related to a show that we recently did on predictive simulation. It's really trying to figure out not just the metric and how you measure it, but what contributes to the performance of that metric.
Right.
So how do you think about, maybe you can take an example and tell us, how to think about this concept.
Sure. We started out with an easy example for everybody to get is sales. Every business is trying to grow sales, and so in the insurance business, very simply, easy to grow sales by either adding the number of people who sell for you or increasing the average size of sale. And so we said, how many representatives do we have? What's the average size of sale? And then we take representatives and say, for example, how do we get representatives? We recruit new ones, we hire experienced ones, and then we have an issue of how long do they stay with us, so what's the retention? Then we take a step back from there to say, if we look at retention, what are the things that make it more likely that a representative will stay with us? And we learn things about if they start off successful, they tend to be more successful. If they come from certain backgrounds, they tend to be more successful. So we do a lot of analysis around how sensitive or how effective are we at recruiting those kinds of representatives, and if we can help them along in those things, what difference will it make in their ability to stay with us, and therefore then ability to increase our sales force.
I can see the tremendous value here for an executive. I mean, the consequences surely from an information infrastructure, there's probably some stress there, but the ability to have what-if analysis and saying, well, if I move this dial and move it the other way, you've been able to really look at correlation, causation, and then sometimes coincidence. When you pick these factors, how do you do it? Is this something that is done at corporate, and disregards business units, or how do you test that those are the right factors?
So it's really important to be working with the business units. It's because it's easy, I think, for corporate to get very academic about how things can be taken apart and put back together, and it's really important to sit down with the people who run the business unit and figure out what makes sense and why they went in certain directions. There's a lot of different ways to grow sales, and the idea here is to be very smart about where you invest, and so it's a good partnership.
So there's 2 or 3 things I'm hearing here. The first thing, of course, is what are the specific factors, what are the dials, what are the leverage points, which has huge consequences from an infrastructure standpoint. Then secondly, the validation with the people in the real world. And then I'd say thirdly is probably the ability to change the models or change the way you think about things as new information is coming in, like new regulation.
Well, first off, it's all well and good to have the model and the math and be able to prove how sensitive something is to a change. if the business unit isn't going to do something with it, then it really was a wasted exercise. So very important then to translate what you've learned into what kind of initiatives will make a difference. So big important thing there is that not just get hung up on the metrics, but actually do something with it. But then as you're suggesting, business changes all the time. So you think you have a model that works, but you have to continually monitor it. You have to pay attention to what's going on. Sometimes a little adjustment. Sometimes you just have to start all over again, depending on what the change is.
So we're talking about the analytics fitting in the framework, and in this case, balanced scorecard, but also your ability to monitor competition at the same time. So if there are things that are changing, you're able to adapt to it. We often think that technology is the one thing that changes everything. Can you tell us, in relationship to analytics, how do you think about the role of technology?
Well, technology is critically important, but what we've learned as we've gone down this path is probably the most important thing. There's lots of tools that will accomplish your objective, and there's good, availability. Critical importance is data quality, data integrity, your ability to put together a reasonable sample of historic data so that you can test the sensitivities and the accuracy of your modeling. So just the data part is huge. Definitions in data is a big deal. So that is probably even more important than what technology you pick. And then, of course, as I've already mentioned, getting the people side of it to work is also critical.
And we often think that analytics is something that you can buy and it's packaged and it's almost like a medication. It's prescribed to a business disease. But I think in your example specifically, you have to have the willingness from the executive to want to investigate further than just the reporting. You have to have the knowledge of your people to be able to build those models and the willingness of testing them across the community so it gets executed.
Well, and I think the other thing is you can only move so fast, right? I mean, no matter how smart you are and what you figured out, it takes time to implement a program and drive change. So technology only gets you so far.
Great. Well, thank you very much, Bethany.
Yep.
Until next time, I'm Bruno Aziza.